Hi, good morning. It's Michelle Silverman Bedell from Silverson's Realty,
Leslie Jones, attorney.
and we will be missing Maria today. She has another engagement from Citizens Bank. She will join us again in 2 weeks. So today the topic is we want to speak about estate sales related to real estate, and I'm going to have Leslie we'll speak about the pros and the cons and different issues that could arise, and I'll chime in.
So with estate sales, usually you want to make sure that the process has already started with the probate, and that they're at least close to getting letters testamentary, because it can create letters testamentary is the authority to transfer the property, and that can take depending on the situation.
Correct.
I'd say honestly 2 to 3, 4 months to get it resolved, depending on the situation. And if it's a contested situation, you as a buyer can be waiting, a significant period of time. So it's good to know what the situation is with the estate. Many people, before they put it on the market, will get the letters testamentary, but you actually have to keep them in place for a certain period of time, and you also have to file certain things with the state to get a release of lien, so that you have authority, and title companies will want to see that, or at least that there's no liens against the estate, so that they can go ahead and sell the property. Because many times people, they'll put a property on and they're just starting the estate process, and they're filing the probate, and that can take some doing, and then certain issues get raised in the title report that have to be addressed by the attorney. So if it's a trust or an estate, you definitely have to make sure you have the trust available, you need the death certificates available, and that, I just had one yesterday. We had to submit to both trusts, the 2 death certificates, and the letters testamentary, just in order to get the process going. So you have to have everything all in place. And if you have it, it's no issue. If you don't, it can take some time, and you also want to make sure that you have the tax ID available, so that they have everything in place at the time of closing.
Right. I think I remember several years ago I was selling an estate sale, and exactly what Leslie said. We were waiting months to get those letters of testamentary, and it was for many people, and it just really delayed the process, and it derailed one of the processes. We could not close, and we had to find another buyer, because that first buyer just could not wait until all the letters were received in a timely fashion. So I think also from a real estate point of view, it's very important. Often I'm asked by an attorney to give an appraisal at the time of death. I'm not an appraiser, but just a broker price opinion or a value of opinion at the time of death. So often I do that for clients of mine, and it's very important to know that the house, when it was sold, or to get a value, is a fair market value, right? And also when I'm listing a property for sale, it's often when the appraisal is done, they want to know that the property was given fair exposure and full exposure on the MLS when you're selling an estate sale. Because very often buyers will assume that they can get a very good buy on a property that's being sold as an estate, because people want to do it quickly. That's not necessarily the case, but that's an assumption that buyers will often make when they're buying an estate property. So the other issue I think that comes up when you're buying an estate property, that the condition of the house is not necessarily in as great a condition, or really has been updated, as if you're buying a regular transaction through a homeowner. So this is a misconception. Often the homes have been renovated. I'm working on one now in Eastchester, where the relatives are really taking their time to clean out the house and update it to sell it in its best possible condition.
It varies from house to house, but typically mostly with the estates, I see that it's as is.
Right.
You have to maintain the system just like anything else, but it's typically as is, and people aren't looking to spend extra money to start redecorating or renovating.
Right.
or even staging. They just want to be, you know,
Done with it.
Unfortunately done with it, you know, because it is an emotionally taxing thing as well as if you're a seller. So,
Right.
So people really like clean out the stuff. It's more like they'll clean it out and it's usually difficult because it's a family member
Right.
who's, you know, sort of cleaning up and going through everything, and it's, you know,
All the paperwork,
yeah.
it takes a long time.
It
and
takes
pictures.
a long time. Yeah, it's very emotionally taxing. That's what I find when I'm dealing with estates. And
Right. I think that's true. I think you can't forget the emotional component that's involved when you're representing the family. You know, they have personal belongings, so they're going through their tax records, their pictures, their photographs, their old school, anything related to their history or family history. It becomes a very emotional factor when dealing with an estate. The other thing that I think is very important, especially with co-ops, when I'm representing a seller or a buyer, we want to make sure that that co-op will allow a purchase or a purchase if you're buying it through an estate, or they will not allow it. So, or a trust rather, they will not allow. Often co-ops will not permit a buyer to buy it as a trust. So you have to really be careful of that. And I guess I'm the same on the sale with a condo or a co-op. I have a co-op sale actually in the city now, and it's taking an enormous amount of time, but it happens to be an estate, and they're waiting to get all the paperwork in from the executor of the estate, and that too is taking time, just because, you know, the process, it's not as quick as a regular sale.
it's definitely true. Unfortunately, I've gone through it myself, and for my own mother, and I had to clean out everything, and it was emotional. It definitely took some time because we put it on the market. It went fairly quickly, so we had to catch up with all the paperwork, and it's definitely going in at the end and cleaning out someone else's life is difficult.
It's very
to begin
upsetting.
with. Yeah, so from that standpoint, I actually think it's even more difficult. I'm dealing with several right now that I am dealing with the estates, and you know, basically you need to ask everyone for, you know, if you're a seller in these cases, death certificates, and the family members, one family member is more cooperative than another, to, you know, vacate the house and help clean out, and there becomes
Right.
a lot of tension amongst the family members as well, in a few cases.
Right.
So
In many cases, I would imagine.
yes. So, you know, as an attorney, I'm usually orchestrating that as well. And then, you know, but everyone should know when you're selling, it always typically goes into, you're not splitting up the assets. It usually, the check will be issued to the estate, so that, you know, as an attorney, I'm not dealing with the breakdown of like the assets of the estate. It usually goes into the estate with the tax ID number, so they have a separate bank account. That all needs to be set up before you close. So it's a pretty simple process. So that's something, you know, that's definitely needed. As long as you have all your paperwork, it's not really a huge delay. And, you know, if you're putting it on the market, if you're putting a house on the market, I recommend having all that lined up beforehand.
And all your paperwork.
If possible. But I mean, many times I see it done during the process, but it's usually better and more streamlined if you do the probate beforehand, get the tax ID number, have everything in place before.
Yeah, I just want to bring up one other point. We had a transaction a few weeks ago where at the last minute, a tax lien, it was an estate sale, right? The woman was selling it, but it was her husband's estate, and a lien came up, or an unresolved taxes. Right? So that, I wasn't sure exactly what happened, but I know that there could have been a delay in the closing related to a tax lien. So this often can come up at the last minute as well when the title search is done.
Right, because what happens is with the title, they'll run a last minute content, and these things can pop up.
Right.
We had a co-op many years ago, I don't know, Michelle and I had done a closing, and an IRS debt came up on the content, somewhere in between when we started the process and the end, and it was a big shock, and we had to figure out how to close and get it closed out. So we had to adjourn the closing, work through it, and it did really, I believe it related to an estate, and it was one of those things that we put the closing off for about a month,
Right,
if I recall.
right.
So it does happen that it can delay your closing, so that's something where if you're buying a property, you should know to, and
yourself
this is
time.
the process, you give yourself time, understand that if you locked in a rate, that you need to make sure that that rate is kept in place, maybe lock in for 90 days versus a 60-day rate lock, and calculate that into your timing and expenses. So that's something I would recommend.
Yeah, and also if you're dealing with an estate, I think that anything can there could be more delays than in a regular transaction. So maybe you have if you're the buyer, have your attorney order the title immediately, so it won't delay should anything come up. So it becomes tricky. I mean, there are pluses and the minuses of purchasing a property through an estate, but if you have the proper representation, it is always helpful. So until 2 weeks from now, because everybody's going on vacation and we have July 4th, we wish everybody a happy and a safe July 4th, and see you soon.
See you soon. Have a nice week.
Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.